This module, we're going to be learning about the Anthropocene and the Great Acceleration from a book by J.R. McNeill and Peter Ingleka titled The Great Acceleration, an Environmental History of the Anthropocene since 1945. McNeill is a historian at Georgetown, and Ingleka is a fellow at the Atlantic Council, a think tank. McNeill and Ingleka argue that we have entered a new geologic epoch called the Anthropocene, literally the epoch of mankind. That, in their opinion, began in the aftermath of World War II. This post-war period of the past 80 years, they call the Great Acceleration because during that time, all of the manifold ways in which we've been the dominant biogeochemical force on this planet have multiplied in effect. Our population has multiplied exponentially. The amount of fossil fuels we've burned has multiplied exponentially. Ditto for the amount of plastics we've produced, forests we've destroyed, and species we've rendered extinct, and so on and so forth. We need to break down this compound word biogeochemical if we are to understand the Anthropocene. We all learned about the water cycle in elementary school, but that is just one of many biogeochemical cycles that compose the Earth system, including the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, the sulfur cycle, the methane cycle, and the rock cycle, among others. You may already be familiar with the rock cycle, by which rock is produced by tectonic activity, which transports material from the mantle to the surface, whereupon the erosive action of the wind and the water, or more tectonic activity, breaks down the rock into sediments. The biogeochemical cycles of the Earth involve geological forces, chemical processes, and biological organisms to form, transform, and transport matter on a global scale. Understanding these biogeochemical cycles is essential to understanding the argument that we live in the Anthropocene. Our extraordinary influence on these cycles is the definition of the Anthropocene. When scientists look at rock strata, ice core samples, or do dendrochronology to look deep into time, they are able to identify past geologic epochs because of their different atmospheric conditions. We are altering the atmospheric conditions of the planet to the same degree that changes in the sun and in the Earth's motion affect planetary conditions. There is a lot of evidence of our planetary scale alteration of biogeochemical systems. But in this chapter, McNeill and Ingleka stick with two examples: the effect we're having on the climate, in fancy terms referred to as anthropogenic climate change, and the effect we're having on biodiversity. We have initiated and or accelerated the sixth mass extinction event in Earth's history. Our substantive alteration of the climate is through increasing the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. We have done this in three main ways: by destroying non-biological carbon reservoirs, that is, burning fossil fuels, which release greenhouse gases, mainly methane, carbon dioxide, and water; through industrial animal farming, livestock produce greenhouse gases as a result of their digestion; and three, by destroying biological carbon reservoirs, mainly forests and marine life, where carbon had been trapped in the tissues of organisms. We kill these organisms, as when we deforest the Amazon. Their bodies biodegrade, and the carbon is released into the atmosphere as a result of the biodegradation process. This chapter is filled with tons of depressing stuff like that. Learning about climate change and biodiversity loss is not a fun time. But I want to stress to you the importance of understanding the past plays in our understanding of both our present and future climate and biodiversity. Scientists peer back in time using rocks, ice cores, fossilized remains of organisms, tree rings, layers of muck and lake beds and bogs, and all kinds of other information transported to us from the past in little coincidental time capsules. Human history also has a role to play in our struggle to understand something as complex as biogeochemical systems. A lot of the information you'll hear about changing temperature on Earth is caveated with "in recorded history." We haven't been directly documenting the weather for very long, only about 200 years in some places, and less in most. But I wanted to make you aware of a citizen science project at the intersection of history and climate science called Old Weather. Ship's captains are required to keep logs that include information about the weather and the ocean and have been doing so for much longer than we have been directly measuring meteorological data. The Old Weather Project asks volunteers, hence citizen science, to help them transcribe these ship's logs to expand our knowledge of weather in the past on a global scale, and therefore to enhance our understanding of climate in the present and future. I hope you take away from this module some lessons about power, the power the human species wields over the planet, and the power of looking backward to see forward.